together so that we can call our meeting to order at 8.
There's no quorum.
7:45 on the 8th. This meeting is called for a single purpose, which is to discuss the COSWAP grant and Green Mountain Falls application for that grant, which is due on February 14th. And hopefully at the end of our evaluation and discussion, we'll be prepared to make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees that we go forward with that grant, which is due on the 14th of February. Materials have been sent out in advance. Just to give a little background, on Wednesday or Tuesday of last week, Rocco Blasi was contacted by CJ Runge of Mile High Youth Corps and encouraged us to make an application and name them, Mile High Youth Corps, as our partner in this funding. It does not require a match in terms of cash. It does require in-kind in management of the program. This is a work crew award, which means that if we're successful, the Mile High Youth Corps will be paid on Mile High Youth Corps will be paid on a weekly basis at a rate of $10,800 per week for a 320-hour work week. So in other words, 8 people, 4 hours. The maximum that can be applied for is 25 weeks, and you have until December 31st of 2023 to complete the project. So, as I said, Rocco Blasi was the first person to be contacted. Rocco has very graciously given his time to help pull together the initial draft of the grant application, which has been sent out to everybody.
Not really.
So with that, I'm going to let Rocco kind of take over from here and walk us through, in a manner of speaking, the grant application, and in hopes of getting through this pretty quickly and taking us to a vote, and of course satisfying everybody's questions and concerns about this application as we go.
Yeah, thanks, David. Nate, are you willing to do some edits as we go through the application?
I mean, I'll have this all recorded, so I can do it soon. Yes.
Okay. So I'll put the editing, I guess, in your control, because it's going to need a quick turn to get it into the package that has to be uploaded to the website tomorrow night to support a Thursday night trustee meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to be respectful of your time, and I know that Rich Bowman is not near a screen. So Rich, let me ask you a question. Would you prefer that I go section by section or just go through by exception?
I think by exception would be fine. Nate brought up the questions I might have, and then matching funds was the only other question I really had of what I've read of it.
Okay. So the payment would come from the state, I think Department of Natural Resources. No money required by the town. We would be applying for a time grant. So it's a minimum of 6 up to 25 weeks. We're going to shoot for the moon and apply for 25 weeks. So there's no monetary commitment by the town. We will be asking for a few things of support from the town, and we can talk about those as we go. So the first couple of pages of the application are just how to apply. And then page 1, we talk about the project name. And we have in the Green Mountain Falls Healthy Forest Project. It's something that I've used in the past. A few years ago, Michelle Connolly from CUSP was gracious enough to approach me in the town with a fire mitigation grant similar to this. So we kind of came up with a shoestring plan of how we would address the town. And that's kind of what I've tapped into to fill this grant out, and also some previous successful grants from CUSP to kind of tailor it for this specific project. So Nate, we're going to need a date next to the project name. I'd recommend February 10th, since that'll be the trustee decision meeting.
Gotcha. Are you, you're on the actual Word document now for the application itself, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's
Gotcha.
officially listed as page 1 of the Co-swap Workforce Development Grant application.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay. So I would recommend the date be February 10th.
Okay.
Additional info on the front will be the project size, the acreage. And I know that you're putting some maps together, so it'll be a combination of the different acreages mixed in with the town rights of way.
Rocco, can we say at this point what our tentative thoughts are on what this will cover for the benefit of Dan and Rich?
Sure, and we can get into the specifics in a few pages, but what we're looking for priorities, scope of work, is there's a 16.37 acre town-owned parcel. It's on Mount Rebecca. It's above and adjacent to the private land, above and east of Hondo Avenue. And Nate's pointing that out on the screen, but Rich, that doesn't help you.
I'm pretty well familiar with the area. I know about where you're talking.
Yeah, so it's above Mountain Ave. 16.37 acres. And then just to the west of that is a 25 acre parcel of town land where CUSP and SWIFT have already started mitigating, but that would continue in that area. And then further west where the Catamount Trail is, all the way up to Garden of Eden, is a 150 acre parcel of town land. So those are the parcels. It also addresses the priority egress routes of the town. And those are listed. We'll discuss those later, as well as some of the undeveloped town rights of way. Now, 25 weeks is just going to scratch the surface of all that acreage. Based on what we've done before with CUSP and working with the SWIFT crews, I think what we need to do is emphasize the areas below the trail system. So between Thomas Trail and the private parcels, when we get into that 150 acre parcel on the west end of town, I'd recommend elevations below where Catamount Trail and Bratton Trail meet. That elevation and below on town land as well, to kind of give a priority, because 25 weeks will not cover everything. And then we can get into the rights of way in a couple of pages. So the work will occur within the 3 town parcels as well as the town rights of way. So Nate, we're going to need a basic project size, the acreage on page 1, and then the project and access coordinates, the lat and long, also on page 1. Do you have that for action?
Yes.
All right,
Hey, Rocco, can I ask a question real quick?
go ahead.
Is there any way that you can actually highlight the areas in which they need to be filled out for Nate?
I
Like on the
can't.
document?
I'm totally following. I know exactly
Okay.
what you're talking
Okay.
We're going to skip page 2 of the application, because that's if we wanted to work with a SWIFT crew, which we're not going to do. Page 3 is a youth corps. Mile High Youth Corps, we've had a relationship with them for over a decade. They've done a lot of trail building and maintenance within and around the town. And that prompted CJ, who's their regional manager, to give us a call when she heard about this opportunity to partner with us. We're asking for the 25 weeks. We're
Is
going to skip page.
Is there a reason why we're not asking, or we're not involving Swift Cruise?
So David asked the question if we could double tap and try to do 25 weeks with each. I specifically asked Mile High if they had the capacity to support 25 weeks between now and the end of 2023, and they said yes. I know that's been a problem in the past with Swift, especially with COVID, because they're all locked in confinement. And so David asked if we could apply 25 weeks with one and 25 with another. And I believe the answer, David, was no.
That's correct.
Okay. So that's why we're not applying twice for this.
Okay, and that's because the 25 weeks will be during the same time.
Well, not necessarily, but we would be, there's some complications. We would be trying to coordinate two separate Sawyer groups at various times. And we would be, in essence, asking for 50 weeks, which is, 50 weeks of 8-man crews. I'm not sure that we can manage that, frankly.
Okay.
So we decided to just stick with Mile High.
Okay.
That sound reasonable to you?
Well, I mean, I know the Swift Cruise, I think the Conservation Corps group, the Mile High group, they're not firefighters, correct?
Right.
And so they're not going to be subject to pulling off of our project to go to fires. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, whereas Swift Crew would be subject to that.
Right.
So that would be one of the drawbacks of using them. Yeah, I mean, I know that I'm not going to be very involved with the direct management of anything. So yeah, I'm trusting your management experience on this, because yeah, if we can't manage it, then we can't. So, I mean, of course, I'd want as many saws out there as possible, but if we can't do it, we can't do it.
Okay.
Okay, so with that said, we're going to go with Youth Corps. So that means we skip page 4 and page 5, which deal with cash grants, because we're just dealing with the time, because we'll be requesting the time grant of up to 25 weeks. Page 6 is the scope of work, and the way that the application wants it presented is a task name, a description of the task and the methods, and the deliverables. Has everybody on the committee had a chance to look through that, or do you want me to go through and explain?
I have
I
read
had
it.
a chance to look at it.
Rich, you have not? Is that what you said?
I had a chance to look at it on my phone. I kind of breezed through it as much as I could in little print.
Okay.
I noticed I wasn't quite clear on, once they cut, were they going to stack in place, or are they going to haul it down to an area you could get to, and are they going to scatter, or are they going to chip?
And so the answer is it depends. For the easy stuff around the rights of way, which is number 2 and number 3, that should be easy to get a chipper close to the work site. And so
Okay.
that'll be chipping of the slash. Up on the hillsides, kind of like what Swift is doing now under the cusp direction above Hondo, it would be lop and scatter of the slash. But this grant wants to address what they call biomass removal. And so, so the proposal here is we have them cut the bowls into log-sized rounds. The rounds will stay in place for up to a year, letting them season in place, dry out a little bit to make them easier to remove by volunteers. Now, Nate pointed out, boy, that's a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. It's a challenge, but I think it's also an opportunity to get volunteers out there from the town, from scout groups, from friends groups, to move the log rounds downhill. I have personal experience moving log grounds downhill from Mount Dewey, from over in the Wallace Reserve, and over at Scott Usman's place. It can be done, and I think if we mobilize enough people, it will get done. And it's a chance, kind of a grassroots movement for the town to get behind this and mobilize. I know we have an aging population, but we also have a lot of resources in the community and in the region, specifically scout groups.
Okay.
Two questions, Rocco. One is pile burning not an option?
I took that off the table from day one, and David concurred, because the piles would be awful close to residential structures. They're not that high up the sides of the hills, and that's not something we wanted to tackle with this project.
Okay. Second question is, if we're unable to meet the biomass removal requirement, are we then on the hook for the cost? Do we have to pay back the grant money if we're unable to meet the deadline in which we have to get the biomass removed?
I can't answer that.
So, to my knowledge, along with the management requirement is basically progress reports that we have to supply the DNR. And I would want to make sure that we had a good plan in place to make sure that we weren't on the hook if we were unable to meet the biomass requirement or biomass removal requirements. And then, we gave that to the DNR, and then DNR said, well, you weren't able to meet the requirements for the grant, therefore you would have to pay it back. I don't want to be a naysayer, but
Right.
that's something that we probably should make sure that we're fully aware of.
Agreed. I think it also emphasizes that we want to work from the trails downhill to where they come against some of the private properties and rights of way to get the biomass downhill a shorter distance. I think the undeveloped rights of way would be very easy to do, as well as the egress routes.
Right. I think so too. I guess I'm mostly concerned with the areas up, say, like the Garden of Eden, that large 150-acre area west of the town.
Sure. Which is why we want to, I agree, which is why we want to focus on the lower slopes of that hillside, which would be where Catamount and Bratton trails meet and below. Because there's a couple of drainages in that area where if we start getting log grounds down there, they're going to pretty much roll all the way down to the utility road.
Okay. And then are we planning on allowing the town to maybe gather that for firewood? Are we hauling it off? I mean, if we're hauling it off, is that all that's all volunteerism?
Right. I mean, the hauling off, I remember when we mentioned that it might be part of what's already been going on up on the hillside above Hondo, and Facebook lit up like, hey, how do we get that wood? Is it ready to come out yet? So I think there's a lot of interested parties in town. There's a lot of wood stoves in town. A lot of people use wood for heating. And so that would be part of the volunteer effort. There may be some older folks who need wood and can't get it. And maybe we ask Town Hall for a list of folks who call in needing some of that wood. And then we get some volunteers with trucks to help assist.
Well, if it's your assessment and your judgment that you're optimistic that this can be done with the biomass removal, then I absolutely support it.
Right. No, I am. I'm optimistic. I think any of the standing dead stuff that they cut is just probably, we're not going to have them cut that into log grounds if it's rotten. That'll be more addressed like the slash, where it'll be lopped and scattered.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And really the focus of this, there's a lot of dead fuels up there to begin with. That'll be the priorities, cutting down the dead disease trees.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave them there to burn. Mhm.
But that, Dan, I hear your points. Those are good points. And I have thought about it, but I think that it's an opportunity as well. And I think we'll have enough support to get the biomass down.
Okay.
Is there a way to write the, to have the verbiage in the application to give us an appropriate leeway? Or do you feel we already have done that, Rocco?
Well,
With
I mean,
regard
I put in the description that cut rounds will be allowed to season for up to 1 year. Volunteers will remove for heating. That gives us time to get that stuff down.
And that's 1 year after December 2023.
A year after it's cut. So certain areas will get cut and treated well before others.
Okay. Because I'm pretty sure it was my understanding that biomass, it all has to be removed before December of 23. I could be wrong, but I think that's it.
If that's a sticking point, then we can have them on the first, this coming year, focus on the hillsides. And then the next year they focus on rights of way.
Yeah, I mean, but like you said, though, I mean, the rights of way, most of those areas, I think that'll be the easier part to get people in there and volunteers to get the biomass removed.
I just highlighted a section there under scope of work. It says, please provide a clear plan and timeline for removing any woody material, etc. I don't see where it says a deadline. I think, to me, it reads, as long as there's a solid plan. I would recommend, obviously, trying to put a timeline that's later the better kind of thing. I mean, if it can be a year after December of 2023, that would, the more time the better, I would think.
I think a plan is probably all they need. I brought this up in my meeting with was it Arlene and Courtney with DNR, and I mentioned that if we're going to in other areas, other projects, not necessarily this one, other areas in El Paso County, that if the plan for biomass removal is to burn them, then sometimes those piles will need to cure for a couple years. So I don't remember their exact response, but I did let them know that, hey, there are going to be a lot of projects in which the biomass removal is going to consist of pile burning. And if that's the case, then, there can't really be a tight deadline on that because it takes a while for that stuff to cure and be ready to burn. So they do understand that. So yeah, I would say you're probably right. As long as we have a plan, say, look, this is how it will be removed. We don't necessarily address a timeline, then it'll probably be okay. I hope so, at least.
Should we consider?
What Nate read there, I didn't see a timeline involved.
Yeah, and there may not be. Yeah, there may not be. I may be misunderstanding. I just want to make sure that
I didn't hear anything in there that was read or anything I read that there was a timeline. It just said a plan.
There is a grant deadline of December of 2023, in which time the grant will have to be closed out and completed. All the tasks will have to be completed, from what I understand in the request for applications.
Well, if we submit an
Everything
application,
would have to be closed out.
do we know when we will know when the applications will be will be awarded? Is
March
that in there?
31st, I believe, is what they said, that the date that they will let everybody know.
Okay, so that will be the March 31st for the dates that they will award the grants. There
Yeah.
will be that will be submitted on February 14th.
Yep.
Okay. To me, this really kind of falls into the category of, if all they can do is say no. I mean, if they don't agree with our plan for biomass removal, then they'll say no.
And Dan, you have contacts in DNR, so maybe that'll be helpful to find out in case the grant doesn't get approved. Was that the sticking point?
Yeah, I can call the I can't remember her name, Courtney and Arlene. Is it Arlene? Anyway, yes, I can reach out to them and I can find out.
I think those are valid concerns, but I also think that we've addressed what our timeline is for, after things are cut, up to a year to get them down. If things are cut in November of 2023 and they want to close out in December 2023, we can close out and say, by November of 2024, that biomass will be down the hillside. Or they just don't award the grant.
Right.
So that's good discussion. But, there were basically 4 parts to the scope. The 3 town parcels, the priority egress routes, and the undeveloped rights of way.
I think all in all, it's a pretty good plan. And it's going to be under the management of the town. Is that my understanding?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, the application will be made by the town of Green Mountain Falls. I am the named person responsible for managing the project, and our thought is that we would develop like a team of people who would work together in management of this throughout the term of the project. But
yeah, I believe it says in the notes that it would be managed by the Fire Mitigation Committee.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, Dave, I think you're the lead, you're the name on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're not in town or whatever, and if you need somebody to walk the site to give progress reports, I can try to find time for that.
Well, thank you. That was our hope, was that we would have a number of people who could volunteer to be on a team of people that would step in and help manage this.
Yeah, it seems like maybe you'll be the primary point of contact for it, but we will be a management team.
Yes.
And okay. Yeah, I think that's a good plan.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as we establish goals and objectives for that team, that would probably be my only concern with that. We need to establish how we're going to manage it, what our goals are going to be, and the objectives to have accomplished.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think it sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nate. Sorry.
Well, it's Rocco. The last page of the application talks about what the project manager's responsibilities are. Site visits.
Yeah.
There's about 8 of them. It presupposes somebody's around town, but like David said, you get a team together, and I'll offer my time as well. I've been up there for site visits with Cusp and Swift, and yeah, it's just some follow-up and some reporting.
Okay.
Yeah, I would be happy to volunteer to give my contact information to CJ or whoever the crew boss is that's running them to if they need to call somebody to say, hey, come check the progress now, then they can give me a call.
I was going to say, I think one major question or a clarification needed is whether the fuel needs to actually be removed by the end of the grant deadline. I think Becky's under the impression that that is the case, but
Okay.
I think we need some clarification on that for sure before moving forward, just to make sure we know the answer to that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nate. I think that it would be really good to know for sure if having that fuel removed is a condition project being complete.
Becky, how certain are you? I mean, 80%,
I
50%?
just looking at the application, you know, when the grant terms are. So my understanding of these grants is that in order to complete all of our required reporting and to close out the project as being complete, that the deliverables would have to be met. And that deadline was listed in that request for applications.
Okay.
Is there anyone we could call tomorrow or something to find out that answer for sure? Because I think it could be maybe interpreted both ways. I don't know how. I'm not a grant expert by any means, but I was thinking that as long as there was a plan that was approved, that maybe it didn't all have to be complete. But again, I'm not familiar with the process.
Courtney's.
I'll call the DNR folks, the project managers, tomorrow morning, and I will send an email to David as soon as I get an answer.
Okay, and that was the
Thank you,
same
Dave.
Courtney that you were talking, that Becky was talking to. Okay, cool.
Yeah, Courtney and I cannot remember the actual project manager's name. Beck, do you remember?
It was listed there in the grant application as well. And then I guess another question that I have is, what is the Youth Corps, the Conservation Corps' ability to help to get some of that fuel out of there? If we've got them for 25 weeks, what a great opportunity to utilize them to assist with that. I'd hate for that. I mean, I love grassroots volunteer projects, but I would hate for that to, burden the community and end up being this, having this be a project that's not fun or that becomes burdensome. So if we could utilize them to accomplish some of that work, that heavy lifting, I think it would be phenomenal.
I think we pretty much will set the scope of what they're doing. So I think that's very, very much can be written in that they will be responsible for bringing down those fuels.
Perfect.
Yeah.
After all, we're not paying them to do a certain number of acres. We're paying them for a week of work.
Let's use
Right,
their young
and-
backs.
Yeah, and I mean, like David said, we can put that in the prescription for them, what actually needs to be done and accomplished. And David's right. If they only get 10 or 15 acres done because they're having to cut and remove biomass, then, it is what it is.
That would depend on the answer that we get in the morning, right? I mean, if that December 31st deadline is to remove everything, then that shifts or that addition of that work for them makes sense. But if not, it's probably not necessary. Is that accurate?
Nate, I think either way, when the areas are marked off, it's because part of this is up on the hillsides, preserving some of the snags for wildlife. So we want some of the dead standing for wildlife. At that point, when we were out there identifying on the ground, we also identified points where we want the youth corps to bring the rounds down the hill, close to where we can get them out.
Okay.
Sounds to me like we have a lot of speculation here as to what we may have as far as the prescription goes. I believe we need to, tonight, wasn't it, to address whether we're gonna go ahead with the grant or not? Prescription can be written later.
Yes,
We're playing with a lot of little stuff here. We can't really decide tonight. We're trying to decide if we're gonna put in for a grant.
that's correct.
Okay. Then that's what we should decide. We can decide about prescription, what the work's gonna be done, what's not gonna be done at a later date, but we need to get the grant going.
Yes.
With that said, I recommend we move on to the next page, I think it's page 8, because page 7, for some reason, came up blank. So we get 2 pages of narrative. We talk about organization information. We, talk about the town, what's happened so far for fire mitigation. So that's the organization info. I have a few happy to glads on that, Nate. I'd be willing to maybe do a phone call if you have time tomorrow morning, taking out certain punctuation and adding a couple of words here and there, but really nothing substantial.
Okay. Yeah, that would work.
Okay.
So organization just talks about the town, what's happened so far, wildfire risk information. I know, Nate, a few products have come your way in the past day or two. We may need links established for those. Have you been in coordination about a couple of those products?
Sorry, what are you referring to?
Some maps, I think.
The maps that I need to create just for the those areas of focus. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. And as a placeholder, I put the project map that CUSP put together for the work they're doing above Hondo. That includes it highlights all the town parcels, but I know that you've been working a map product as well.
Yeah, and I'll make these maps tomorrow one way or another. We've had issues with our ArcGIS subscription that I hope is resolved tomorrow, but if not, I will, I have other GIS software on my personal computer I can use to get these maps done. I was just hoping not to do it twice or, keep it on town data, but either way, they'll get done tomorrow.
Okay.
And I see that you've referenced a 2019 risk summary report from the State Forest Service.
Correct.
Okay, so that's I haven't looked at that yet. Have you also you could put in the USA Today report from a few years back? You're familiar with that, aren't you, Nate?
Yeah, I never found a link to that, but however, I do have on our website, there's a link to a similar map that basically shows Green Mountain Falls in like a, very high risk area. It's a very similar map, maybe even the same data source as that USA Today article, but it's the one that I linked to on our website for wildfire risk. So would that be
Right.
helpful to add in a link to that?
Probably. The USA Today one is it incorporates not only the fuels, the hazardous fuels, the topography and all that, but it also incorporates demographics of the high risk areas, ability for people to leave, things like that. So I know that the USA Today study put us at a 4.89, I think, out of 5. So we are one of the highest risk areas in the state actually in the whole entire West. And we are definitely one of the highest risks areas in the state of Colorado. And I believe that USA Today study is an indicator of that. if it's something, if you have information that's similar to that USA Today study, then yeah, that's something that we should definitely put in there to make sure that the grant people are understanding the very high risk that we have here. Yeah,
Here's
that's
that. Can you see that screen? This is the wildfirerisk.org site that has a similar look anyway to that one. I never found that USA Today. I'll look again tomorrow briefly.
if I can find it, I'll send it to you as well. It's pretty
Okay.
much going to say the same thing that this is saying, though. All that dark red.
Yeah, you can see it kind of zoomed out in relation.
Yeah.
Don't know why the planes are that high, but oh, this is that's different. Okay, that makes sense.
So Nate, I think you have the risk summary report that CUSP had, John Bruno at CUSP had produced for us. It's, I think, about 4 or 5 meg. If you can set up a link to that on the town site, and then we can reference the link in that wildfire risk information section.
When was that sent to the town?
Well, I think I sent it to you just the past couple of days. I'll resend it so that you
Okay.
can have it for posting.
If it's recent, I have it.
But don't read it just before bedtime because you'll have nightmares.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Project location, I just have a couple happy to glads on that one. Is there any discussion about the location?
I don't believe so.
Purpose and objectives. When we did the Healthy Forest Plan a few years ago, we had 5 objectives. I took the top 3. Reduce fuel loading and fire risk around Green Mountain Falls, link with surrounding landowner efforts to advance forest health, improve wildlife habitat and recreation experience for public land users. And then we explain in each of those how this grant would further those purposes and objectives. Why don't we go to timeline, the next page. We talk about going through November of 2023. This will be a seasonal project depending on the weather and the ground conditions. Project impact talks about how bad the risk is locally. 99% of the town does live in the WUI. And, you know, we all know that the fire danger is high and it's quantified in this section. So project maintenance, I took a stab at. How long will this be effective? This will basically be as effective as the town is committed to it. I put 25 years, but the hope is it stays effective well past that. I know that the local elementary school principal is retiring. I also know that they are doing a job search for someone who has experience in outdoor education. Their 6th grade is also outdoor focused already. These are potential groups we can tap into to talk about forest health and to get them out there with loppers and pruners to prune down some of the undergrowth that comes up. Just a thought. 5-year maintenance and funding. We stress the in-kind volunteer time, future grant submissions, and town budget appropriate to the risk. Leverage funding and resources finishes up the application. And then there's some agreements about liability, insurance, crew time award. But it sounds to me like the biggest question we had was the biomass removal. And it sounds like Dan will make some calls in the morning, close the loop with David. And then we'll know if we have that year after, or if everything has to be removed by the end of the reporting period. That will flavor how we try to use the crews. These are trained Sawyer crews. So the biggest bang for the buck is they're out there the whole time cutting down trees. But if DNR requires all the biomass down, then we're going to have to shift their priority. But it sounds like we can flex to the requirement. I'll be quiet now and let you discuss.
Thanks,
Sounds pretty
Rocco.
good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is very well laid out. I think we've had a lot of excellent input from everybody on this. And unless there are other comments or discussion that is required, I'd say well, let's move to take a vote on pushing this to the Board of Trustees for approval.
So moved.
Second, all
So
in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous
Yeah.
that we will recommend this grant application to the Board of Trustees for approval.
Sounds good.
All right. I want to thank everybody for availing yourselves at the last minute and at late hour to have this meeting. I think it's, it's worth our time given the amount of dollars that are available to and the kind of work that can get done and that we desperately need. So thanks to everyone for the time you put into this.
Yeah. Thank you
Okay,
very much,
thank you,
Rocco.
sir.
Yes.
Thanks,
Special
Rocco.
thanks. All right.
Have a good night,
Um,
everyone.
We will adjourn the meeting. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, guys. I'll
Fingers
send you an
crossed.
email soon as I get an answer. I'll send you an email.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Good night.